everybody. Welcome to the Body, Soul, and Spirit podcast. I'm so excited. I love the topic of vulnerability. We've been talking about that because it kind of gets us all to think about where we are in the spectrum of vulnerability, where we are as far as letting all those walls down and allowing our authentic God version self come forth. I love this topic because I think that this is a topic that every single one of us needs to hear. And I said to you that when we stop becoming vulnerable, we stop learning. We are no longer learning things about ourselves emotionally because we've stuffed it. We're no longer learning, why do I do the things that I do? Most of my clients that come in and get counseling, I've noticed we will go down a journey. And when I'm in the middle of a counseling session, I hear sometimes pauses. Sometimes people don't know how to answer when I ask certain questions about them. And they don't know how to answer. It's almost like this gaze that they have, almost clueless. And that's a good indication to me always that they've stuffed emotions. They stopped learning emotionally. They can't answer questions as to why. Why do I do the things that I do? Why do I do that? Why do I respond that way? And they've never done the work because they stopped growing emotionally. They stopped growing even in the mind. They stopped growing and learning things about themselves. They're no longer curious. Curiosity. That's a powerful word because curiosity is the road to healing. Did you know that the more curious you get about you, the more healing can take place in you? So what ends up happening is we end up having self-protection. And we talked about self-protection a little bit, touched it. And I said that the reason why most people are not vulnerable is because of self-protection. But the other topic I want to talk about today is detachment. Detachment. Detachment is also self-protection. Self-protection is, I'm going to protect myself. I don't want to be hurt ever again. I don't want to feel hurt. I don't want to feel rejected. I don't want to feel offended. I'm just going to detach. Think about that word detachment. You're not totally attached. You're there, but you're not attached. A marriage can be detached. A relationship can be detached. A friendship can be detached. A church and a member can be detached. An authority figure and a sibling can be detached. Siblings can be detached. A parent can be detached from the siblings. Siblings can be detached from the parents. Just the fact that we are in relationship doesn't necessarily mean that we are attached to one another. There's a detachment. So whenever there's self-protection, there's going to be detachment. It's not a bond. It's not close. And I believe that this is really dangerous because this is the area where if you do have a spiritual relationship with God, you'll know that this is an area of attack. This is an area where you're in easy prey, if you will, because you're not totally in covenant. You're not totally attached. There's a detachment. And the reason why is because you're in self-protection mode. When you see kids and they're young, they're detached. They can detach from relationships. And they detach because they're afraid. Have you ever thought about your childhood and you were detached from others? Where did it come from? Did it come from maybe a parent that hurt you? Sometimes we connect with the wrong people, right? When we detached, please don't forget this. When we detach, we stop learning. And when we stop learning about ourselves, we are no longer curious about ourselves. And so in order for us to learn, grow emotionally, we're going to need the curiosity. But curiosity is vulnerable. I'm going to say that again. Curiosity is vulnerable. Curiosity needs vulnerability. It's vulnerable to get curious about oneself, to really admit, right, that we have pride as self-protection. That takes vulnerability. It takes vulnerability for you to start to get, right, curious. Curiosity needs vulnerability. In our last podcast, I told you that one thing necessary for healing is curiosity. You need curiosity. And in order for curiosity to happen, right, you need vulnerability. Curiosity is necessary for learning. You cannot have curiosity if you're not vulnerable. When you're curious, you care about something. So when you don't have curiosity about yourself, like, why do I do that? Why do I hide? Why do I detach? Why am I on the defense mechanism, right? Or I'm on the defense all the time. Why am I always on this fight and flight? It's probably because you're not caring enough about yourself. Probably there might be some self-rejection. There might be some self-hatred there. Because when you're curious, you care about it. When you're curious, you finally start to take love, interest, and care about it. And when you start to love yourself, again, from a healthy point of view, you start to get curious about yourself. That's when you know you're on a good road to healing, because you start to get curious about you. But when your emotions are shut down, when you say things like, I don't really care, I'm fine, it doesn't matter, I'm fine, I'm fine. Have you ever found yourself saying that? I have. It doesn't matter. It's okay. I'm fine. I'll get over it. That is shutting down your emotions. That is not curiosity. And curiosity is vulnerable. And vulnerability is necessary for you to learn. Without vulnerability, you cannot grow emotionally. So you also have to learn, right? Because we also learn from trials, from errors, from mistakes. But in order for you to grow from it, to learn from those things, you have to be vulnerable. To say something that maybe doesn't work or does work, to admit this works, this doesn't work, right? You have to be vulnerable and curious enough to understand, even be sad about it. Most people don't want to feel sad. That's why they're like, we're fine. We just want to emotionally override, right? We don't care. We don't want to feel it. We would rather not feel it. That's why we maybe defend ourselves, have self-protection, because we don't want to feel it, because that makes me sad. But when you defend against sadness, right, you will never learn. I'm going to say that again. When you defend against sadness, I'm just going to ignore it because I don't like feeling sad. But when you keep defending against it, you're not going to learn from a negative experience. The only way you're going to learn from negative experiences is if you stop defending against feeling sad. I'm not saying to go in depression mode or some sadness mode. No, what I'm saying is get curious. Allow yourself to be vulnerable. Bring down the self-protection. That might make you feel sad a little bit. And that's okay, as long as the sadness doesn't stay there very long. But what you're doing from a safe place, right? A curious place. I'm just trying to be curious. It's a curious place. I'm not shaming myself. I'm not being hard on myself. I'm just getting curious about myself so that I can be vulnerable, so that I can keep learning, so I can keep growing, so I can be emotionally healthy, right? And I might feel sad at that moment. Stop defending against sadness, because that is never going to cause you to learn from a negative experience. I'm going to say this. You won't try something again if you keep saying, I don't care. You will never try something again. You will never try it. If you keep saying, I don't care, or I just give up, or you're never going to try it. You're never going to get curious about yourself. You're never going to go on the journey of healing if we keep saying things like, I just don't care. I just don't care anymore. I just give up. What you're saying is, I give up on myself. I give up on healing of my soul. And none of us want to do that. So one of the things that we've got to understand, and we'll hit it more in the next podcast, but you are only going to learn through attachment. So back to detachment, think about your relationships. Are they detached somehow? I understand that there's some relationships that they've just got to be detached because they're not healthy. They're toxic. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about attachment. to a marriage, attachment to something that's supposed to be attached. It's healthy. It's kind of like God brought those relationships to you. You should be attached to them. I'm not talking about the toxic ones. But when you are detached, what you're saying is, I'm in self-protection mode. When you're emotionally attached, okay, this is where you're going to learn. This is where people learn. People learn in attachment. That's where you're going to grow. So if you find yourself with fear for many, many, many years, something you want to ask yourself is, have I been detached? Because detachment is self-protection. But the only way you're going to learn, grow, transform, evolve, heal forward, move away from the trauma, move towards an authentic you, is there's got to be attachment. When you are emotionally attached, you want to learn, right? When you want to learn, you want to grow. And so this takes me to my leadership, because I've noticed that sometimes when people have come with traumas and they've been so hurt and so wounded, they have these self-protections, which I get a lot of that. And I find that either the relationship can go sour when they are no longer attached, when there's detachment, because people learn through attachment. So when they're still attached through me as a leader, usually when there's attachment, you want to learn from them. You want to kind of emulate them because there's something about them that they have that you would like or need. And the minute I find that the self-protection mode goes up, it's a sign of protecting themselves. They're no longer vulnerable, so they detach. Well, they're no longer wanting to learn from me. And that's not a good place, because what we're saying is we're in self-protection mode. You will never hurt me again, et cetera, et cetera. What's required for learning is our capacity as a human being to really allow ourselves to express ourselves. This is something I'm going to hit in the next podcast. Learning and having the capacity as humans to be able to express ourselves is going to require us to be attached. I want to leave this podcast, and I want to leave it by asking a couple of questions. Do you find yourself detaching? Do you detach from relationships? Is that something that's easy for you? Because fear of rejection, fear of getting hurt, fear of what somebody's going to do to you. You don't have the capacity to be wounded. Therefore, I'm not vulnerable. Therefore, I self-protect. I just detach. It's easier for me to detach rather than be vulnerable and attach. But if I'm attached, watch this, that's where you learn. Attachment in relationships is where people learn. Let me ask you these questions. Have you been detached from the relationships that are healthy and you're no longer learning from them? Are you emotionally attached to the people that you're supposed to be attached to? Are you emotionally attached? Are you mentally attached? Is your soul attached, right? This is what would be a soul tie. Or do you have the wrong ones? Soul ties are something to be, something important to be talking about. Soul ties, that's what a soul tie is. You're attached. Sometimes we wind up being soul tied to the wrong people. And that doesn't get us anywhere. It doesn't really let you grow. You could be soul tied to a bitter person. If you're soul tied to a bitter person, guess what? You're not going to grow because you're both attached to the wrong thing. I'm talking about people that you can learn from, grow from. There's got to be an attachment. When there is no attachment to it, it's a detachment. And the reason being is because there is self-protection. Are you attached to the right relationships, to the ones that are going to help you grow, the ones that are not going to tell you what you want to hear, but the ones that tell you what you need to hear, the ones that you see and they're growing too, and they're getting healed, and they too are becoming vulnerable alongside with you? Do you have a problem with attachment? Do you find it easier to isolate? That is a sign of self-protection. And remember, self-protection will never lead you to grow emotionally, to heal properly, and to grow and learn even areas about yourself. We'll see you guys next time.